It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. Let's get out of here. Aye.
Hey everybody, it's Brother Aaron from Got a Minute, and we're going to talk about 6 differences between the Olivet Discourse and the Temple Discourse, and some of you might be saying, what? I thought they were all the Olivet Discourse, and they sort of are, but not quite. So we're going to talk about that in a second, and there's some really cool differences, really big differences. This is my first draft, so maybe I'll make a nicer one soon, but you'll get the idea. There's some really encouraging things here. Helps to support the pre-tribulation and rapture, among other things. So this was inspired by a brother, Micah, whose YouTube channel is Who Is Like God. We were actually having a phone conversation the other day, and I watched his video. It was about an hour long, and he brought up point number 4 that I've never really noticed before. So we're going to talk about that. And then after I talked with him and I watched his video, then I went and watched the Chuck Missler video, which I'll share. So I'll put Micah's video in the description box below, about an hour long, and his channel is called Who Is Like God. And I'll put Chuck Missler's video in the description box below, and that's about an hour long, and that will be in the bottom of the description box as well. And so really, I'm just going to highlight some of this stuff and try and make it brief and quick and bring some zingers in here. I don't want to, there's probably more subtle differences here, but I don't want to overdo it because I want to just highlight the big stuff. And so here's the big stuff. Are you guys ready? All right. So one thing that I noticed Chuck Missler say was in Luke 21, verse 37 through 38, over here, it talks about he was in the temple during the daytime, okay? But when he was talking to them on the Mount of Olives, it was at night and it was a private conversation. So I never envisioned that before. I never noticed that, but here, let's get the text proof for that. Let's show you. So this is Luke 21, and right at the end it says here, and in the daytime he was teaching in the temple, but at night he went out and stayed on the mountain called Olivet. Then early in the morning all the people came to him in the temple to hear him. So when he was doing Luke 21, he was in the temple, or when he was discussing all the events in Luke 21, he was in the temple during the daytime. So that's a big deal. We're going to talk about that in a second, but just know that Luke 21, all these details in Luke 21, he was in the temple in the day, and we are children of the day. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, written to different audiences. Most people understand that Luke was written to the bride, but the discourse here was, you can almost call it the temple discourse. So he was in the temple here, in the daytime. And let's go over to the beginning of Mark to just help hammer this point home. So over here we have the widow's 2 mites, and then it says, then as he went out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, Teacher, see what manner of stones and what buildings are here. And then it says, now he sat on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple. Okay, so he's out of the temple. He was in the temple, but now he's outside the temple on the Mount of Olives. And then they ask him privately, that's Peter, James, John, and Andrew. Tell us, when will these things be, and what will the sign, and when all these things will be fulfilled? So they're outside, it's private, it's the Mount of Olives. Why? Because the end of Luke 21, it says, but at night he went out and stayed on the mountain called Olivet. So isn't that interesting? And also in Luke 21, we know that this is the same story because he's talking about the 2 widows' mites here, but it doesn't say that he leaves the temple in Luke 21. It goes from the 2 widows' mites and it goes in to the context of Luke 21. So Luke 21, actually, so what ends up happening is Luke 21 happens first in the temple during the day, and then he walks out to the Mount of Olives and discusses different details, similar details, but different details in Mark 13 and in Matthew 24. Same thing. Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple because he was there first in the daytime in Luke 21. And his disciples came up to show him the building of the temple, skipping over here, Mount of Olives. It was a private occasion, and they had similar questions. Okay, so let's go back to the chart. So Luke 21, they're in the day. They're there in the daytime in the temple, and he's discussing the details of Luke 21. Mark 13, Mount Olives, it's a private occasion, it's at night, and it's at night. So a lot of people understand that Matthew 24 or Matthew in general, was likely written to the Jews, likely written to the tribulation saints from Mark 13, likely written to the rapture group or the bride of Christ. These guys are being spoken to at night and day. Isn't that so cool? Now, let's go over to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, having this in mind. This is kind of the second point now. Now, this is not isolated in Matthew 24 and 13 and Luke 21, but this follows the pattern of this whole idea. So in Luke chapter 5, you and I are children of the light, and we are children of the day. And so specifically Thessalonians 5:5, it says, you are all sons of the light and sons of the day. We are not of the night or darkness. So there's this contrast between the children of the day and the children of the night. It says, for when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. Hold on to that word, escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. So you're not in darkness. You are all sons of the light. You see how this works here? So there's this difference in this whole passage of sons of the day and sons of the light. And comfort one each other. Why? For God did not appoint us to wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. So there's this contrast. Well, going back to this whole contrast of that, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, night, day. We are sons of the day, of course. The sons of the day are the ones that escape. The sons of the day are the ones that escape. And that brings us to the next point. The sons of the night are the ones that have to go through it. Well, the Jews have to go through it. The tribulation saints have to go through it. Night. They're spoken to on the Mount of Olives at night. Spoken to on the Mount of Olives at night. They don't escape. There's no verses in this chapter that's telling you to pray that you're worthy to escape. It tells us to watch, or it tells them to watch. It tells the reader to watch. But this over here, it says, pray that you're worthy to escape. Whoa, now there's a whole different thing here. Now, pray that you're worthy to escape. Well, that word escape in Luke 21 is G1628. Ekaphego. I think that's how you say it in Greek. Ekaphego. Pray that you're worthy to escape. You can only find that Greek word 7 times in the Bible. How about that in the New Testament? And it's found, wouldn't you know it? That's that word. Isn't that amazing? 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 3. And they shall not escape. They shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness. So in other words, you are the children of the light, and therefore you shall escape. Pray that you are worthy to escape. Escape. That's in Luke 21. It matches Thessalonians 5 verse 3. It's the exact same word. So isn't that cool? So we got this difference of, it's the temple discord, daytime, nighttime. Children of the day escape. Children that are not of the day do not escape. There's no escapes verses in these chapters. All right, next point. This is actually noted by both videos, by Micah and by Chuck Missler. We have a mention of abomination of desolation in Matthew 24 verse 15. We have a mention of abomination of desolation in Mark 13:14. We do not have a mention of abomination of desolation in Luke 21. Well, most people that understand eschatology understand that this is the midpoint of the 7-year tribulation. Jesus says, when you see the abomination of desolation, let's go read that verse, and it refers us back to Daniel. And I'll just read Matthew 24, just for time's sake. But therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. So, pointing back to Daniel 9, Daniel 8, Daniel 11, a little quick thing here about that. Antiochus Epiphanes IV is a blueprint of the Antichrist. He set up an abomination of desolation in the temple during the Maccabean times in around 168 BC, give or take. He made a covenant with them. He killed a lot of Jewish people. It happened for a couple of years. The Jewish people killed one of the priests at the time, went to the wilderness for a couple of years, came back and took the temple back on Hanukkah. So Jesus basically is saying that's going to happen again. There's going to be some guy standing in the temple saying he's God. That's going to be end times event. It's going to be a midpoint event. So the people that this is directed to, the Jews are going to see this. The tribulation saints are going to be seeing this. No, not the raptured group. The raptured group is not going to be seeing the abomination of desolation. Why? Because they are sons of the day. They escape. How about that? That's amazing. That's so great. why have we not noticed that before? These two other points are kind of smaller points, but they're still worth mentioning. And there's probably more points, but again, we're just going to just highlight it really quick. Matthew 24, 9 through 13, he's talking about death and endurance. He who endures to the end, let's just read it properly. But it says, he who endures to the end shall be saved. And then they, over here in verse 9, then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you. I mean, it's pretty rough, right? So there's this theme of death and endurance. Now, Luke 21 does have similar themes in it beforehand, up in here. But here's the big difference. It says that over here in verse 28, now when these things begin to happen, look up and lift your head. Why? Because your redemption draws near. This kind of verse is not in Matthew 24. This kind of verse is not in Mark 13. There's this message of hope here. Some translations over here in Luke 21 verse 7 read a little differently, but this version says, and what sign will there be when these things are about to take place? Right? So keep that in the back burner there. And the next point, the last point I have in this paper is in Luke 21, it says, look at the fig tree and all the trees. Matthew 24 and Mark 13 doesn't say and all the trees. It just says look at the fig tree. I'll show you that. So we got Matthew 24 right here. It says the fig tree. It doesn't say and all the trees there. And Mark 13, where is this fig tree thing? Oh yeah, over here it is. Fig tree doesn't say and all the trees. So Luke 21 does that extra little step and adds and all the trees. Well, what does that mean? Not quite sure. Chuck Missler was just simply saying, I think he was just saying, you know what, don't think too hard. It's just talking about the spring when summer is near. And to a certain extent, I kind of agree with him. But another little thing that we could consider is trees, to a certain degree, represent people. So in Daniel 4:20, we see a dream about Nebuchadnezzar, and it says, the tree that you saw, which grew and became strong, it is you, O king. So this tree that Nebuchadnezzar dreamt, the tree represented him. Okay, so that's one example of a tree. And another place where it's talking about a tree is the way of the righteous and the end of the ungodly, and he shall be like a tree. So it's talking about a righteous man, and he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water. So a tree is used as an illustration as a person. So it's possible that those that are righteous in Christ are the trees spoke about in Luke 21. Maybe there's another interpretation for that, but it is good to know that either way, it says, look at the fig tree and all the trees. When they are already budding, you see and know for yourselves that summer is now near. The one feast that's right at the end of the spring is the Feast of Weeks, Pentecost. And if we're looking at this literally, well, that's what it would be pointing to. But if we're looking at this figuratively, with the trees representing people, I mean, that's another way to look at it. However, the big point that I really want to highlight is really the first 4 points. The abomination of desolation is mentioned in Matthew 24. The abomination of desolation, the midpoint, is mentioned in Mark 13. It's not mentioned in Luke 21. That's a big point. Why? Because we're not here to see it. Going backwards to point number 3, there's no mention of escaping in Matthew 24. There's no mention of escaping in Mark 13, but there is mention of escaping in Luke 21, verse 36. I didn't write that down, but verse 36. I'll write this down right now. Luke 21, verse 36. Using a pencil. Okay. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 5, talking about the children of the day. Well, we are sons of the day, not sons of the night. The ones that are of the night go through it. They go through it, but the sons of the day do not go through it. And Luke 21 is actually, it was spoken in the temple during the daytime, according to verse 37 and 38. And the Mount of Olives were at night, and they were a private conversation. So picture Jesus talking about the abomination of desolation, and it's very dark outside. Very dark setting. Maybe kind of a scary, uncomfortable situation. But Luke 21, they're in the temple, it's bright, it's comfortable, and it wasn't a private thing. It says, I'll read this one more time here. And in the daytime he was teaching in the temple, but at night he went out and stayed on the mountain of Olives. Then early in the morning all the people came to him in the temple to hear him. So inside in the temple, and we are waiting to be brought into the heavenly temple. We, as the lampstands, are waiting to be brought into the heavenly temple on Rapture Day. And so there they are, children of the day. And we are the lampstands, bright with fire, with oil in our lamps. And so what an interesting perspective we see here. And if we go over to Revelation 1, I just thought about this right now. But when John's brought to the throne room, what does he see right around the throne? Right away, John, to the 7 churches which are in Asia, grace to you and peace from him who is and who was and who is to come, and from the 7 spirits who are before the throne. So these 7 spirits are before the throne. We got the 7 churches. We're seated in heavenly places already. We're in that temple already. We're just waiting for a glorified body. So isn't that cool that it's just children of the day are in the temple listening to this escape plan and are not hearing about the abomination of desolation. Pretty cool stuff. So, hope that it blesses you. Can't wait for the great escape. And I hope to see you soon. We're one day closer. Go, Jesus, go. Adios, muchachos.